I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody...
Paris, on a summer night wrapped in the shimmer of streetlights, became a quiet stage for something beyond fashion. It wasn't a designer gown or a tailored suit that stood at the heart of the story, but something Taehyung held tightly in his hand. A small object, yet carrying within it the weight of thousands of miles. It seemed to have a pulse only its owner could feel. It wasn't the media's cameras that revealed it first, but a coincidence that felt almost like fate. A fan caught it in a fleeting moment, in between Taehyung's unhurried steps as he left the venue. No excessive sparkle, no official announcement. Only a presence too sincere to be dismissed as a fashion accessory. Amid the usual cheers that accompanied his appearances, an unusual stillness slipped in. People wondered, why did he bring it to Paris? Was it a sign of something he kept in his heart? Or simply a reminder that home is never truly far away? It wasn't a sponsored gift, nor a promotional gimmick. It was something that had aged with him, once belonging to a small room in Daegu. Something that had traveled from his very first stage to this very night. In every thread, it carried a story unwritten in lyrics or interviews. When he stood before the cameras, it remained in his grasp. Not to flaunt it, but neither to hide it. For Taehyung, perhaps this was another kind of courage, bringing the most personal part of himself into public view. Even if the world didn't understand, he still carried it. That night, Paris welcomed more than a global star. It welcomed a man who arrived with his own history. A history not stored in media archives or corporate documents. A history that could only be read in details as small as this. Fans began sharing the photos online. One by one, fragments of the story were pieced together. They compared it to older pictures, discovering the object had appeared years ago. Perhaps backstage, on the road, or in quiet, unremarkable days. When the news reached Korea, the tone shifted. It was no longer Taehyung in Paris, but Taehyung brings his heart to Paris. Articles emerged, speculating warmly about the object. Yet he remained silent. His silence wasn't distance, it was space for us to wonder. Because sometimes, mystery is the best way to keep something sacred. And Taehyung has always known when to speak, and when to let silence be his language. Like that night beneath the gentle Paris sky. Weeks later, he appeared at J-Hope's concert. Amid the stage lights and roaring cheers, there was a moment when time stood still. His eyes glistened, his lips holding back something deeper than ordinary emotion. Even the camera seemed to lower its gaze in respect. Those tears weren't weakness, they were confession. A confession that friendship and long journeys carry their own emotional cost. For fans, watching him cry was seeing the most human side of a legend. No shields, no distance, just an open heart. Suddenly, the story of that object became tied to this moment. Had he brought it as a source of strength? Had it silently witnessed the tears that fell that night? There were no answers, but perhaps the questions were enough. On social media, hashtags surged overnight. Photos from Paris and J-Hope's concert were blended together, creating a new narrative. A narrative about a man who carried his own little world in his hand. And took that world with him, even in his most fragile moments. Writers tried to solve the mystery. Some sifted through old interviews, hunting for clues. Others searched photo archives, hoping to spot its first appearance. But as always, Taehyung let imagination do the work. For some, it was just an object. For those who loved him, it was a bridge. A bridge to the past that had shaped him. And a bridge connecting his heart to ours. Perhaps that's why he could make silence feel full. Why even without words, the story flowed. Because the object wasn't just a symbol, it was proof that Taehyung lives with memories he protects. And somehow we all find ourselves protecting them too. In Paris, he left a trace that wouldn't vanish with the change of seasons. A trace not found on posters or billboards. A trace seen in the eyes of those who witnessed him that night. Eyes that said, "We understand, even if you never explain." J-Hope's concert may be over, Paris may have returned to its routines. But this story keeps moving from one phone screen to another. From one heart to the next. Like that object, it never truly rests. And amid all the spotlights, he still chooses his own path. A path sometimes quiet, sometimes filled with shouts of love from afar. A path only he knows the end of. Yet somehow we all feel like we're walking it with him. Because Taehyung never simply arrives. He always brings something, sometimes a song, sometimes a smile, sometimes tears. And this time he brought the purest part of himself. The part that makes us remember, even in the noise of Paris. That object, those tears, and the silent moments in between. They have merged into one long story. A story he may never write, but one we have all already read. Not with our eyes, but with our hearts. A few days after returning from Paris, Taehyung was spotted at the airport. Though fatigue was evident, he still greeted fans with a warm smile. But for those with a keen eye, there was a weariness that went beyond the physical. It was as if something still lingered in his mind. That object remained in his grasp, just as it had in Paris. It was as though he wasn't ready to tuck it away into a suitcase or bag. To some, this might have been nothing more than a habit. But to those who understood, it was a signal. The media began publishing follow-up articles, attempting to connect the dots. Some called it a personal talisman, others a token of friendship. Everyone tried to assign meaning to the object. But no one could confirm the truth, except Taehyung himself. In one radio interview, he was asked about the moment at J-Hope's concert. He simply smiled and said, "Some things are too precious to explain." The sentence was short, yet it carried 1,000 interpretations. And fans chose to honor it in silence. Photos from that concert have now become iconic within the fandom. Not only for the tears that fell, but for the honesty that shone through. Honesty that is rarely seen on such a grand stage. Honesty that erased the distance between idol and fan. Some fans created illustrations, blending moments from Paris with the concert. They combined the beloved object with tear-filled eyes. The resulting images spread widely, becoming a symbol of two important moments. A symbol now living in the hearts of many. Others began writing fanfiction inspired by the story. They imagined conversations between Taehyung and the object. How it might have heard his unspoken worries and laughter. How it had silently witnessed the journey of a star. A few fashion brands tried to capitalize on the story's popularity. But Taehyung refused, determined to preserve its meaning. He knew that once the object was marketed, its soul would be lost. And he would not allow that to happen. In a brief post, he shared a photo of his reflection in a window. No words, no explanation. Yet in the corner of the image, the object could faintly be seen. Fans once again began piecing the story together. To some, this was just a small tale among bigger headlines. But to his fans, it was a reminder that Taehyung is a man who lives with memories. Memories he carried to Paris, to the concert and back home. Memories that we now carry too. Time passed, but the story remained. Not because of hype, but because of the sincerity woven into it. Sincerity that kept it relevant as days turned to weeks. And each time the photo resurfaced, hearts felt warm again. When autumn arrived, Taehyung appeared at a public event once more. This time, the object was nowhere to be seen. But everyone knew he had never truly let it go. He had simply chosen to keep it closer to himself. J-Hope's concert is now part of music history. But for those who were there, the memory of Taehyung that night is far more personal. It is the memory of a friend sharing in both the joy and struggles of his brother. A memory that made tears feel beautiful. Writers began to refer to this as the Paris tear story. A narrative that intertwined the city of love with genuine friendship. A story not crafted by an agency but by life itself. A story that lived between the lens of a camera and the beat of a heart. Taehyung continued to move forward, his schedule filled with new projects. Yet in the midst of it all, there was a part of him that remained unchanged. A part untouched by the speed of the world around him. A part that kept fans feeling close no matter the distance. If there is a lesson in this story, it is that small things can hold great meaning. Meaning that transcends distance, time, and even language. Meaning that can only be felt, not explained. Like love, friendship, and cherished memories. And Paris, in all its grandeur, became the perfect backdrop for this tale. It was the city that witnessed a star carrying his home in his hand. That saw tears fall not from sadness but from gratitude. That bore witness to a moment that would be remembered forever. In the end, the object was no longer solely Taehyung's. It now belonged to everyone who held this story in their hearts. Each time the tale is retold, the object lives again. And with every retelling, the love behind it grows stronger. Perhaps one day he will tell the whole story. Or perhaps he will let it remain a beautiful secret. Either way, we know one thing for certain. This story has already become a part of us all.
I just need to carry on, cause society's a myth put there to make you sit. Listen to what they give, don't ask questions, shut your lid. Yeah, don't ask questions, shut your lid. I need to run away from this and go get off the grid.